the woman, who was physically attractive and fit, offered me a sum of money and proposed marriage. It is not common for women to offer men money and request marriage, which raises a significant question: what is the reason behind this behavior? Was her desire for us to marry based on my striking appearance, or was it influenced by other factors? My physical appearance was not particularly striking. I was of average height and weight, with an unremarkable face that blended into the crowd. I had a medium build, medium height, medium hair color, and so on. I was not particularly athletic, and I did not excel in any particular field. I owned a medium-sized sports car, but that was about it. The year-old Volkswagen diesel Jetta was not particularly striking, perhaps due to my living situation. I resided in a spacious mansion by the beach with a yacht, which may have contributed to my lack of attention. I did not reside in a lavish or extravagant home, but rather in the same family home my grandparents left me. It was a respectable middle-class neighborhood, but nothing particularly noteworthy. My jet-setting lifestyle and immense wealth were not the reasons for my success. I was 27 years old at the time. My previous occupation was that of a charity organizer, with a salary comparable to that of a McDonald's manager. I was not attending glamorous galas, but rather organizing 3,000 fun runs and fundraising drives. Could it have been my silver tongue, capable of wooing women effortlessly? My conversational skills were not exactly legendary, and I certainly was not a ladies' man. In fact, I lost my innocence at the age of 18, after much effort. I am not a John Holmes in the bedroom, nor am I a pretty average man. I am not the kind of man that women would typically propose marriage to. In fact, I am not the kind of man that women would typically give a second glance. They would probably ask for directions or need help carrying bags. What could possibly attract someone like her? Well, I happen to belong to a pretty. My ancestors managed to survive a multitude of dangers and deliver the appropriate genetic material at the optimal time and place. I consider myself fortunate to have been born in the United States of America, a country that affords its citizens a certain degree of privilege. I am not boasting, as I had no direct role in this outcome. However, I was fortunate to be born into a country that afforded me certain rights and privileges. This moment was of particular significance to certain individuals, particularly to Pia, an eligible American male. As an Asian beauty with classic features, including long hair, high cheekbones and a dazzling smile, she was a notable catch. Her slim figure and effortless style made coveralls look good. I found myself becoming increasingly smitten with her every time I saw her. Pia's voice suddenly interrupted my train of thought as she extended the money. Pia, I attempted to refrain from laughing. I'm sorry, but I can't marry you. We barely know each other, and you know me well. Ron, I've been around for a long time. Pia persisted, becoming increasingly adamant. You want more money? I get more. I inquired of Mr. Wilson's grown children for more. Severance, please leave. I've been Mr. Wilson's caretaker for years, until his passing last month. I handled everything. From nursing to cooking to household chores, Mr. Wilson was my neighbor and former football coach, so I knew Pia fairly well. She often called on me for help with chores or repairs, simply as a good neighbor. However, marriage was a whole different matter. Pia, I shook my head at her, saying, you're something else. I was flattered, but I could not understand why she would want to marry me. In a fit of anger, she spoke in her native language, expressing her disdain for the government agency that had granted her 90 days to leave. She informed me that my visas had expired. Mr. Wilson's children were unwilling to assist, and they were eager to sell the house that they had gifted to me. They had provided me with money, and I had given it to her. Ron, Pia, I began, marriage is not about money. You cannot marry someone you do not love. I am certain that there is someone out there who will love you for who you are, regardless of your appearance. There is someone who will love you for your personality, your character, and your heart. Pia waved her hand dismissively, indicating that she did not have time for love. She stated that she needed a good man and that Ron was a good man. Pia then asked, why do you say rest of life? Ron replied, I asked Pia, who looked at me oddly. I then asked her why she wanted to spend her life with someone she did not love. I had previously talked to a lawyer about immigration. He had advised me that we only needed to be married for 2 years before I could leave and marry a better man, who was waiting for me back home. I could not do that. Pia's persuasive rhetoric was difficult to resist. The proposal painted her as a second best and a loser to a man she had never met. It was a compelling argument. Why not simply return home to a better alternative? Pia stamped her foot. Ron, why are you so inflexible? I needed to remain in America to support my mother and sister financially. I sent all the money home to pay for my sisters. Pia's mother requires medication, and if Pia were to cease sending money to her family, her sister would be forced to live on the streets. Pia was concerned that she would be held responsible for her mother's death and her family's homelessness. Pia attempted to reason with her, stating that the issue was not about the money. If she were to marry him for purely sentimental reasons, it would be considered fraud, and they would both face legal consequences. If you are imprisoned in an American prison and subsequently deported, your mother and sister will be left without your support. Ron, if INS sends me back, I will be of no use to my mother and sister. It is irrelevant whether we marry, it is a decision that will have no impact on the well-being of my mother and sister. I am aware that you have seen my house, I am aware that I am a good woman. I am aware that I am capable of taking care of you. I am aware that you will not regret this decision. Pia, I began to realize that you are out of your mind. She seemed desperate, and to be honest, I am not sure that I would have made the same decision. I was amenable to the idea of having a more varied diet, and Pia was attractive. I attempted to dissuade her gently, but the conversation was not progressing. I suggested we discuss it at a later time. I hoped that Pia would abandon this impractical idea, or that I could avoid her. Pia surprised me by thrusting a roll of bills into my hand. Ron, you must decide quickly. Mr. Wilson's children want me out by on the weekend in question. I returned the roll of bills to Pia. I informed her that I was not accepting her money. I then turned and walked back to my house. I did not require Pia's financial assistance. While it was true that I was a trust fund beneficiary, I was not the type of beneficiary who received millions. My grandfather had invented a key ingredient in a popular regional soft drink years ago. The trust received a small percentage of sales each year through this invention. Every March, I received a check from the trust fund. While it was not sufficient to live a lavish lifestyle, it was sufficient to supplement any job I wanted. The trust fund afforded me time to pursue my interests. I learned to fly, studied martial arts, painted, home repaired, first aid, and even tried my hand at music. I regularly donated to charities and community activities, all anonymously, at the age of 17. My grandfather taught me this valuable lesson. After receiving my first trust check, I made the decision to spend freely, purchasing an expensive car and attending numerous parties. However, 3 months into this spending spree, my grandfather froze my account and repossessed my car. This experience served as a wake-up call, demonstrating the impact of my actions on others. From that point onward, I chose to keep my trust fund a secret and live within my means. This period also highlighted the value placed on appearances by people, particularly women. In comparison to substance, girls would often express admiration for a guy with a flashy car and maxed-out credit cards. However, I found it challenging to gain attention from a cute bank teller until she saw my account, which held a substantial sum in the high six figures. I had yet to encounter a girl who placed a higher value on functionality than on form. Additionally, I have experienced the dissolution of several romantic relationships due to my occupation. It is not uncommon to hear remarks such as, "You're a nice guy, but your job is so uninteresting," and "I am aware that my current position is not one that will lead to advancement. I deserve better." I have managed to maintain a certain level of success in my search for a romantic partner, having never had to pay for sexual encounters. However, while I was searching for a suitable partner, many others were seeking someone who could provide them with financial security. One-night stands are enjoyable, but they are becoming less appealing. The following morning, Pia showed up. She arrived at my residence with numerous suitcases and boxes, and I observed with astonishment as she proceeded to unload her belongings into my living room. Ron informed me that Pia would remain in the house while I was away, and that she would demonstrate the advantages of a marital union. I was already behind schedule for my appointment, and I began checking my watch. A significant meeting was imminent and, as such, I was unable to remain in the house. I was instructed to refrain from any action until I returned that evening. I was acknowledged with a curt yes, followed by the responses yes and yes from both Ron and Pia. I was informed that I should attend my place of work and that we would discuss the matter further upon my return. I was then urged to leave the premises. Upon my return that evening, I had prepared a speech which I intended to deliver in a firm but gentle manner. I had initially considered allowing P to stay for a few days, but this was no longer a possibility. I considered consulting with the attorneys who managed my trust fund regarding Pia's visa issue, but decided against it upon my return home. The house was noticeably cleaner than I had ever seen it, even surpassing the level of cleanliness observed following my grandmother's passing. There was an incredible smell emanating from the kitchen. Pia then appeared, bearing a wooden spoon in her hand. She greeted me with a kiss on my stunned face. I was unable to locate a rice cooker in the kitchen. I proceeded to utilize Mr. Wilson's rice cooker, which he had previously passed away. I then inquired as to where her own rice cooker was. She waved a spoon at me, indicating that she did not possess one. I managed to locate the necessary ingredients for a simple meal. Pia, I do not possess a rice cooker. There should be some Uncle Ben's instant rice in the cupboard. Boil water and drop in a rice packet for 2 minutes. Voila, you have rice. Pia appeared shocked. Ron, that is not rice. You require a rice cooker. She pointed with the spoon. You should clean up. Dinner will be on the table shortly. Before it became cold, the aroma of the food was quite appetizing. However, I decided to wait until after dinner to speak. I opened my dresser drawer and discovered my socks neatly folded and lined up. However, something seemed amiss. I picked up a pair of socks and underwear and noticed that Pia had ironed them. Dinner was served. The meal was excellent, comprising a fish dish accompanied by rice and salad and a dessert of a fruit cocktail that I had never seen before. Pia was keen to know about my day, and I found myself enjoying our conversation. She appeared to have a talent for understanding the people I worked with and offering suggestions that I had not considered for clients and problems I described. Pia even shared a few amusing anecdotes from her own life. Setting a good mood around the table. I considered beginning my speech, but Pia interjected, suggesting that we take a walk. She was correct, it was beneficial for my health. I acquiesced and we strolled around the block. Pia then suggested that she clean up the kitchen first. I agreed and we continued our conversation. Pia accompanied me on a stroll around the block. We engaged in pleasant conversation and ambulated for some time. The atmosphere was agreeable. I was reluctant to disrupt the mood. I resolved to address the matter with Pia the following morning. As we proceeded towards my domicile later that evening, I retired to bed. Pia was in the hallway, attired in a bathrobe and showering. Her voice was melodious and her pitch was nearly perfect. I surmised that she would retire to one of the 3 spare bedrooms. I had 3 spare bedrooms and I had been sleeping without clothes for years. I reminded myself to wear a bathrobe if I had to leave the bedroom for any reason. I was almost asleep when I felt a warm body lift the covers and slip into bed with me. Pia molded her small frame to mine. As a male, I can imagine my initial reaction when a female figure slipped onto my awakening nether regions. He attempted to turn away in an attempt to hide his rock-hard penis. There are 3 other bedrooms that he could move to if she wanted to sleep there. Pia said, licking my ear, no other bed has what this bed does with that. Pia Dove was under the covers, fulfilling a fantasy that he had had since the day he first saw her. However, Pia in real life was even better than any fantasy he had had. This was not just a quick thank you. Pia offered me a dinner date, as she had done with previous women. She teased me with her lips, tongue, and delicate hands, keeping me on the edge. She made love to every part of me, and if there were medals for it, Pia would have had the gold and silver locked down. I came so hard that I saw stars, and Pia managed to get me off 3 times that night. She never let me pleasure her, but I fell asleep with her the following morning. I was able to check off an item from my bucket list. I awoke to the sensation of warm female lips around my manhood on a cool morning. The morning only got better, no cold cornflakes for me. Pia had peeled fresh fruit while baking some type of pastry. I never did get the chance to give my speech to Pia, I barely made it. In order to arrive at work on time, I waited 4 days before marrying Pia at the courthouse. Was it my heart or my stomach that made the decision? It was certainly not my brain. I was craving a comfortable life with good food and clean clothes. However, I had the law firm recommended by the trust draw up a prenup detailing who would receive what in the event of a separation. I was compelled to persuade Pia to engage the services of a lawyer to review the document. I inquired of her why she would expend funds on legal counsel, given that I was a reliable individual who would not betray her trust. However, I genuinely derived pleasure from her company. She had grown up in a fishing town outside the city, where her father had perished at sea, leaving her mother and her infant sister. Her infant sister, her mother, was adamant that they succeed academically, as education was of paramount importance to her. At the tender age of 11, Pia's mother took her to a moneylender for a loan with onerous terms. In order to repay the loan, Pia was required to work in a brothel owned by the lender after school or work hours. In the event that she failed to repay the loan, her sister was to be sold into prostitution. Pia earned a nursing degree in her native country but was unable to obtain certification in the United States. She sent every penny she earned back home to support her family. Pia was always busy outside the house, constantly seeking ways to generate income. When she was not filling in as a home health aide, she was engaged in various entrepreneurial activities, including selling Mary Kay cosmetics, hosting Tupperware parties, and selling jewelry at swap meets. If there was a profit to be made, Pia was on it. She was a master at bargaining and only accepted money from me for groceries. Pia would drive her car she would frequent the local farmers market or fish market to procure fresh food at competitive prices. Despite her strenuous work schedule, she consistently returned with change and appeared to sleep for a mere 4 hours or less each night. She demonstrated a proclivity for seeking out bargains at consignment shops, a preference that became a running joke among our acquaintances. Even in the early morning hours, she would present herself with impeccable grooming, including meticulously styled hair and makeup. After experiencing her exceptional proficiency in the realm of sexual intimacy, I found myself continually intrigued by Pia. I recall one particular instance when I was reclining on the bed with her, and I expressed my admiration. I inquired as to the source of her expertise. I touched her lips, inquiring as to whether she had acquired this skill through her previous relationships or her time with American boyfriends. Pia embraced me, while Ron never initiated physical contact. I maintained my innocence, stating that I had not kissed a man until I came to America. However, she touched my groin, prompting me to question whether she had engaged in sexual activity. I had never had boyfriends. Mr. Wilson, our deceased neighbor, had taken care of me in my final days. I was perplexed by her actions. I sat up in shock. "Mr. Wilson," I exclaimed, "our deceased neighbor was taken care of by you in his final days, and this is how he repays you." I was enraged. How could my former football coach take advantage of a vulnerable girl in such a way? Fortunately, he was already deceased, or I would have killed him. "Pia, that old the individual in question compelled you to perform the act in question." Pia seemed perplexed. "Ron, why are you distressed?" She gently rubbed my abdomen. "Mr. Wilson never compelled me to perform any act. I derived pleasure from providing him with comfort. I did so to safeguard Mr. Wilson from injury." "Wait," I was perplexed. "Listen, Ron." Pia continued massaging me. "Mr. Wilson was occasionally indisposed, yet he retained certain needs. After his wife's demise, he would occasionally seek out women, but he was apprehended on 2 occasions and lost all of his money. I did not want him to sustain injury, but I was aware that he still had desires. Therefore, I acquired the necessary knowledge from instructional videos on how to. At first, I attempted to please him, but he resisted and even kicked me out of his room. He threatened to fire me if I tried again, but I waited until he was asleep and made sure he was happy. Eventually, he stopped fighting me and allowed me to continue, despite our ongoing arguments. I was able to make him happy and maintain his trust in me. "Safe, good Lord Pia," I muttered, scratching my chin. "I hope that wasn't part of your job description." "Wait, Pia. You're not doing this for other men on your home health aide or other jobs, are you?" "I do not engage in such activities for any other man." Pia's sincerity was appealing, and I found myself laughing. Perhaps Mr. Wilson was simply a solitary elderly gentleman with needs, but I recognized that I would not have been able to resist Pia's resolve for long, either. Despite the fact that our marriage was merely a facade, I made an effort to maintain appearances for Pia's benefit. Pia had a profound connection within the Asian communities. Each weekend, there was a celebration, whether it be a wedding, baptism, birthday, or other event. Pia had mastered the art of networking, and it seemed as if she knew everyone. I derived great pleasure from these gatherings, not merely from the events themselves, but from the people and their outlook on life. These individuals did not live to work, rather, they worked to live. While they were undoubtedly dedicated to their careers, they placed a premium on family and friends, foregoing the trappings of the corporate world in favor of a more balanced lifestyle. I derived greater joy from a backyard barbecue with Pia than from any extravagant party. In these informal settings, one's material possessions or professional status held little significance. The mere presence of an individual was enough to bring about a sense of community. I was acutely aware that I would miss this sense of community when Pia and I parted ways. As the one-year agreement drew to a close, with less than 2 months remaining, I had instructed my legal counsel to prepare the divorce papers, despite the fact that our prenuptial agreement had not provided for her any financial compensation. I had set aside a significant amount of money for her to receive following the dissolution of our marriage. However, Pia was reluctant to accept financial assistance and insisted on contributing her fair share. In regard to the household expenses, I attempted to reallocate the funds to her account, but she was perceptive and therefore I set aside the money in a separate account. Additionally, I maintained her vehicle, refueling it and undertaking necessary repairs without her knowledge. Pia had been granted a temporary green card, which permitted her to reside in the country. However, she suddenly exhibited nervous behavior, and I observed that she was acting out of sorts. I assumed it was because of our impending separation. Lately, she had been dressing nicer, cooking my favorite meals more often, and being more intimate in the bedroom. Ron and Pia began looking across the table at me during dinner. I requested another favor from her. "Sure thing," Pia replied. "What's on your mind?" "I need to Pia then proposed that we bring her mother and sister to America, but stated that her attorney advised against sponsoring them due to insufficient funds. We had been filing our taxes separately as a married couple, with the majority of Pia's income being in the form of cash, which she readily distributed to friends for various needs. However, she was reluctant to provide it to a government entity. Pia, an individual with whom I had been in a relationship, had expressed concerns about the potential consequences of unreported income. I had previously cautioned her about the possibility of such income being discovered at some point in the future. She then inquired as to what I could do to address this issue. She also questioned the rationale behind providing financial assistance to politicians whom she held in low regard. "Sponsor my mother and sister. Pia, we are divorcing imminently, so my reported income will be of no benefit to you then." I proceeded to elucidate the situation to Ron and Pia, who was visibly nervous and preoccupied with her food. It was imperative that we remain married until my mother and sister arrived in America. This was an unanticipated turn of events, I informed Pia. "How long are we talking about?" "Not too long," Ron and Pia replied in unison. The lawyer, in an optimistic tone, estimated the length of the separation to be approximately 1.5 to 2 years. I feigned consideration of her request, acknowledging the significant implications of such a decision. "What are Mr. Wonder's thoughts on this potential delay?" Pia dismissed the matter with a wave of her hand, emphasizing the importance of family and the understanding that he would wait for me. The alternative was to revert to microwave dinners and laundry duty while pursuing other romantic interests, or to continue the fantasy of a relationship with Pia for a little longer. I sighed dramatically and said, "Okay, Pia, I guess we can tolerate each other for a while longer." Pia's face lit up with her classic smile, and she returned to her meal under her breath. I heard her say, "Thank you, Ron," approximately 6 months after that conversation. The relationship subsequently deteriorated. I was at a local sports bar hosting a fundraiser for my former college team, which was enjoying a winning season at the time. My alma mater was not renowned for its sporting achievements, but it had been a decade of rebuilding. The bar's manager and assistant manager were alumni of the opposing team, and a betting game ensued among them. Patrons engaged in a variety of wagers on the outcome of the game, with the proceeds going to charity. I typically consume only beer or wine with dinner, but I recall engaging in a brief physical encounter with one of the female attendees after an exciting play on television. That is the extent of my recollection until I awoke the following morning with a severe hangover. Ron, wake up. Pia shook him. Her words reverberated in my mind like hammers. Damn it, Pia, I thought. I tried to cover my head with a pillow. I feel like death warmed over. Can't you just leave me alone? We need to go. Ron, get your car. I have a lot to do today, she said, her tone stern. She handed me a glass of water and some aspirin. She didn't look pleased after stumbling out of the shower. Pia, I said, I'm sorry. I lost control. I didn't mean to behave badly with those women. Why did you behave badly with those women, Ron? She demanded. I found you drunk with those women acting like wild animals. I wasn't in the mood for a lecture. Pia, it's part of my job to attend these events. You know that. To the sports bar where my vehicle was parked, Pia was unusually taciturn for the duration of the journey. She could no longer contain her emotions. Why did you behave inappropriately with those women, Ron? I lost a great deal of respect for you. I found you intoxicated with those women, acting in a manner that was akin to wild animals. I'm not in the mood for a lecture, Pia replied. It is part of my job to attend these events. You are aware of that. Ron, it is not acceptable to act in a way that reflects poorly on your wife and thereby diminish her respectability. Pia countered, noting that Ron was the one who had brought up the topic of respect. She then proceeded to cite an example of how Ron's actions could potentially affect her feelings of respect towards him. She asked how he felt about her behavior when she would become visibly excited and animated after receiving a letter from her husband, whom she referred to as Mr. Wonderful, the fisherman. She then asked how he thought she should act as a wife. Ron, it's different, Pia responded, her tone softening. I ensure that you are never present when I read the letters. I never allow you to lose respect. As your wife, I believe that your actions are not aligned with the respect I deserve. I am not happy, Pia. If you are unhappy, perhaps you should consider pursuing a different career path, such as selling oranges at the off-ramp. Let's not forget that you are merely mine. In terms of legal status, the wife is defined as a woman who is married to a man. The rest of the woman in question is considered to belong to a man named Mr. Wonderful, who is a fisherman. Pia kept her eyes on the road and remained silent. Ron, you say that I do not make you happy. You always seem content with what we do. She finally replied. We arrived at the sports bar. I dug around in my pocket for the car keys. I felt irritable. Pia, most of the time, you do make me happy in that way. However, this is not the case at the moment. The year-long period without any form of physical intimacy was the longest I had experienced since I was 18 years old. I grumbled to Pia, who did not respond as I got out of the car and closed the door. The next day, a power outage closed our office early, resulting in me arriving home to find Pia's car parked there. I had assumed that she had a home healthcare job today, as she had not been at home. I proceeded to climb the stairs to the bedroom, where I was surprised to find Pia. I thought she had a home healthcare job today. As I ascended the stairs to the bedroom, I heard sounds that caused my heart to sink. They were muffled and unmistakable, and they were sounds that I had never heard from Pia. The rhythmic slaps and the deep male voice encouraging her to go deeper were not sounds that I had ever heard from her. They were sounds that I had never heard from anyone else. It seemed that she had broken her vow to save herself from Mr. Wonderful or anyone else. It seemed that we both had been screwed, while neither of us had been able to have sex. I bitterly thought that she had even put on her paused at the bedroom door, experiencing a sense of nausea. I was unsure whether I truly desired to confront her. After all, we were merely married in name. I was unable to determine which emotion was more distressing, Pia's teasing me for 2 years or her sanctimonious lecture in the car about saving face and purity. It was, in my opinion, a rather absurd concept. I considered hiring a prostitute that evening and engaging in the act in the dining room in front of her. However, I ultimately decided against it. I immediately decided to confront Pia. I fetched my camera, ensured it had film and flash, and cracked open the bedroom door. I would send a photo of Pia engaging in sexual activity to her partner, the fisherman. I braced myself for the possibility of Pia being in bed with another man. Instead, I found Pia sitting on the bed, fully clothed, with a notepad in her lap and with a pen in her hand. The television played an adult film. Pia had the VHS remote beside her, pausing the tape to jot something down and rewinding to different scenes. A stack of VHS tapes lay beside her on the bed. Pia's back was turned, so she did not notice me. I quietly shut the door after a moment of confusion. What was Pia up to now? I wondered. I decided to wait and see what would happen. I went downstairs and exited the front door. I did not have to wait long to find out when I returned later, at my usual time. Pia greeted me at the door in a short nightie and planted a passionate kiss on me. "Ron, you make me so hot," Pia said, fluttering her eyelashes. "Let's go," I said, as I led her inside. This was a rather amusing turn of events. I was unsure of Pia's intentions, but I played along. I was tired, but Pia was not giving up. She insisted, "Ron, let's go now. I have an itch, only you can scratch it." She ran her hands over her body. I was surprised by her request. I was fully aroused and had to take a seat. I was unsure of Pia's intentions. I asked, "Pia, are you sure about this?" She replied, "I'm sure." Her eyes briefly showed fear, but she continued to engage in suggestive talk. "Oh yes, Ron, let's do it," she urged, rubbing her backside against me. I pulled Pia onto my lap and kissed her. "Okay, Pia," I said firmly, but I informed her that we needed to be realistic. I told her that I wanted my wife back. I lifted Pia, who weighed less than 100 pounds, and carried her upstairs to the bedroom. Pia put on a robe, which was the only item of clothing she wore, and met me. In the hallway bathroom, I instructed Pia to begin speaking, but I interrupted her. I informed her that there would be no questions. Pia simply complied and entered the bathroom, where I had drawn a warm bath with scented beads. Ron sighed as she eased into the water. "This felt nice, good," I replied, turning to leave. "Stay there and soak until I get back," I instructed. I returned 25 minutes later to find Pia so relaxed that she was almost as I assisted her out of the tub and wrapped her in a large towel. She resembled a jellyfish. I then transported her to the bedroom and laid her gently on the bed. Pia permitted me to eat her flour, but she did not permit any other form of physical contact. Life was progressing smoothly. Pia eagerly checked the mailbox daily for updates on her mother and sister. She was particularly interested in her sister's insurance request. As far as I was aware, Pia still corresponded with Mr. Wonderful, the fisherman. While this was somewhat troubling, I reasoned that he was only referenced in Pia's letters every few weeks, whereas I had her in person on a daily basis. Overall, I felt that I had the more favorable arrangement at this juncture. Approximately 18 months later, a letter arrived from the INS confirming approval for Pia's mother and sister to come to the USA. I reflected that this was long overdue, given the INS requirements. A considerable amount of paperwork was required, even more than when Pia and I were married. There was always another form, document, or record to be filled out, and it was always in triplicate. After reading the insurance company's message for a moment, I considered destroying the letter but quickly dismissed the idea. Pia had always been honest and had done her best to uphold her end of the agreement. Furthermore, it would only the inevitable could not be delayed. We had enjoyed a fruitful period, but I would miss Pia. I resolved to give her the letter that evening. Unfortunately, that evening I was tasked with entertaining a contributor who was a classic example of a spoiled rich kid. He had been expelled from several universities and had failed in every position of responsibility in his father's companies. Now he was overseeing his father's charitable contributions, were a position that he was unable to exploit in order to harm the family business. Our town had a plethora of historical attractions, restaurants and other charms, yet this individual, who could be described as a spoiled brat, expressed a desire to visit clubs. The appeal of such establishments was never fully comprehensible to me. What was the point of being teased by attractive females that you could never have? It was akin to going to a restaurant, orders food but does not eat. What is the purpose of this action? The client, however, was not eating. I was sitting in a private booth for 3 hours with a woman named Bambi, Lexus, or Bunny. She was very attractive and was touching me inappropriately. He was drinking alcohol heavily while I was drinking ginger ale. What do you do in this situation? Bambi, Lexus, or Bunny asked me to do something sexual. She was undressing and shaking her breasts in front of the wealthy men. The young man's face brightened as he observed the woman's ample breasts. He laughed and explained that they were philanthropists, helping the less fortunate and improving the world. He then buried his face in her bosom, prompting the woman to ask if he meant helping starving children in Africa. The woman, who was called Bambi, and her friend, who was called Lexus, then moved over to me and rubbed their breasts while the young man stuffed dollars into the woman's G-string. I murmured something like that, pushing her away and standing up. Bambi, Bunny, Lexus was now wriggling in his lap as she replied, "I could never understand the whole problem. If all these people are starving in Africa, why don't they just move to a country like France or something?" He laughed and spilled his drink on me. I excused myself to clean up, exiting the booth and approaching one of the bouncers. "Hey guy," I said, holding up a $50 bill. "Can you make sure my companion and I get ejected from here in a hurry?" The bouncer eyed the money in my hand. "Sir, I do not have sufficient reason to remove you gentlemen from the club grounds." I added another $50 bill. "I would also like a simple thumping of my companion for this service," I requested. The bouncer pocketed the money. We were quickly tossed out and found ourselves lying in a pile in the alley behind the club. After our hasty exit out the back door, I was dirty but unhurt, while my companion was laughing loudly. Ron exclaimed, "Goddamn." Upon rising to his feet, I observed that it had been a considerable period of time since I had experienced such enjoyment. He was, in my estimation, a person of similar disposition to my own. I inquired as to the financial requirements for the establishment in question. I offered my assistance and he accepted. I then suggested that we proceed to the vehicle where I had stored the relevant documentation. Upon my return, Pia greeted me, kissing my cheek. She then informed me that I had a strong odor of alcohol and cheap perfume on my person. I was asked why I smelled like a brothel. I informed her that I had been transporting a client to a club where he had spilled something on me. I offered to buy her a drink. As I started to head towards the stairs, I could tell that Pia was still somewhat skeptical. "Ron, you weren't with any ladies, right?" she asked, her voice weary. "Of course not," I replied, although I could see that she still had her doubts. "Ron, if you weren't with other women, then we should have physical intimacy right now," she said, pulling me onto the couch and trying to undo my belt and zipper. I laughed and pushed her hands away. "Pia, I have." I produced the INS letter from my suit coat pocket, but Pia was focused on undressing me. "Ron, I observed you staring at women with large breasts, which resembled cow udders. I am eager to ascertain whether your observations are accurate." "Pia, I concede the point. You may read the letter about your sister and mother from the INS later." "Ron, this is excellent news. Mother and sister can come to America," she exclaimed, clapping her hands. "I will call Mother now. We must make preparations." Setting up the phone call to Pia's mother took hours with all the operators, country codes, and internal lines. It was more complicated than a space shuttle launch. I was still sitting on the couch, partially exposed. "Hey, Pia," I called out, pointing to my phone. "I would like to discuss the matter of our pleasure, which I understand to be your intense desire for me. However, it would appear that Pia is not paying me any mind, as she has skipped upstairs. Ron, you are a strong stud, and I am sure you can be happy and fool me anyway. I have a number of things to do, so I will leave you to it. We will have fun later tonight." She called back before disappearing into our bedroom. It was good to see her so happy. As Pia handled the paperwork and logistics to bring her mother and sister to America, I had my lawyer prepare our divorce papers. I wonder if Pia is already. I was engaged in the process of identifying potential housing options in the vicinity in anticipation of our eventual separation. I refrained from inquiring about her future plans, presuming that she would inform me when the time was appropriate in the days leading up to her family's arrival. Pia exhibited a remarkable level of activity and energy. It appeared that she had not slept at all. The house was meticulously clean, in fact, cleaner than a hospital operating room. Pia prepared a vast array of culinary delights, including a multitude of their favorite dishes. I joked with her, suggesting that she might be expecting more than one mother or sister, based on the sheer quantity of food she had prepared. The food that she had stored in the refrigerator was finally consumed on the day of the meeting with Pia's mother and sister at the airport. I had previously seen images of them, but seeing them in person was a different experience. Pia's mother was like an older version of Pia, quiet but assertive, and she spoke decent English. Pia's sister, who went by Lucy, was stunning. She had the same beauty as Pia, but in a taller, more striking way. Lucy had the kind of looks that turned heads as she walked by. What surprised me was that she had the same beauty as Pia, but in a taller, more striking way. The most striking moment was when she spoke in a drawl, saying "Howdy, Ron. Nice to meet y'all." Lucy, with a slight West Texas accent, informed us that she and her friends had grown up watching bootlegged VHS tapes of old American TV shows like Dallas and Dynasty. Lucy was particularly obsessed with these shows and had spent hours practicing to sound like the characters she knew, including every season and every actor. Hearing her talk like someone straight out of Dynasty left me speechless. Lucy looked at me, and I could see a hint of worry in her eyes. There was a hint of worry in her eyes. "Ron, honey, are you okay? Did I say something wrong?" "No, Lucy," I replied, trying to shake off my surprise. "You're doing just fine." "It's me. I'm just a little stunned." I was grateful that Pia intervened. "Ron, close your mouth. You'll catch flies. Load up the luggage in the car. Let's head home while I pack their things." Pia, Lucy, and her mother chatted away in their native language. Mom and Lucy settled in smoothly. Subsequently, my mother assumed responsibility for the culinary aspects of our household. She was an exceptional cook, capable of transforming any dish into a palatable meal. Her cleaning abilities surpassed those of Pia. I was astonished to observe that my old running shoes had been transformed into pristine condition. Previously, I had dreaded returning to the pre-Pia era. 2 weeks later, we sat down to another one of my mother's remarkable meals. However, the atmosphere was noticeably tense. I surmised that the imminent announcement of our relocation was imminent. Consequently, I decided to address the matter. I began by addressing my mother directly, Lucy, and then turning to Pia. I was aware that there was something that I needed to be told, so I encouraged her to proceed. We both knew that this day would come, and I had the divorce papers ready at the attorney's office. All that was required was for her to provide me with a date, at which point I would file them. She did not need to put her life on hold any longer. She could return to her former partner, the fisherman, whenever she was ready. At the mention of divorce and the fisherman, Lucy and my mother exchanged glances, their expressions becoming increasingly tense. Pia spoke rapidly in their language before finally addressing me. "Ron," Pia began, "I need another favor from you." Pia's sister Lucy jumped in. "Pia, let me listen." "Ron, it's actually me who needs the favor, not P." Lucy sat down, her napkin. "You see, Ron, I need to establish residency here for 6 months to sit for my board exams. Could you put up with me for that long?" This caught me off guard. I looked at Pia. "Pia, what about you? Is this what you want? Do you want me to hold?" Pia commenced the process of filing for divorce by presenting her mother and sister with the relevant documentation. "Ron, we are a family and family members are expected to support one another." A week later, Lucy requested my assistance in learning how to drive. This request was made while she was accompanied by a woman of Asian descent who was following my instructions closely. I was initially reluctant to accept this request, but after spending a few days in the car with Lucy, I began to consider enrolling her in driving lessons. This experience led me to question the common perception that Asian women are less skilled at driving. Lucy's performance behind the wheel did not align with this stereotype. The act of driving prompted me to consider the possibility that the world's most proficient drivers were native to Lucy's homeland. This was because the majority of those with less impressive skills had relocated. The only instances in which Lucy slowed down were when she was approaching McDonald's. She would often cross multiple lanes of traffic in order to reach her destination. It is notable that McDonald's experienced a surge in popularity following Lucy's arrival. The excitement generated by Lucy's presence overshadowed any concerns about her driving abilities. After a few weeks, I was able to relax my grip on the door handle. After the second month, I was able to breathe normally when Lucy merged onto the freeway. Lucy was able to merge onto the freeway without difficulty, although the lessons lasted longer than expected. It became apparent that Lucy possessed a similar level of intelligence to her sister, Pia. She was also a good conversationalist and could hold her own in discussions. However, one day while we were chatting in the car, Lucy dropped a bombshell. She informed me that her sister, Pia, was as clueless as they come. I was taken aback by this revelation and responded in a joking manner. "That is precisely what I am referring to, Ron." Lucy persisted. "I am incredulous that Pia is abandoning you for that individual in your homeland." I replied in a more serious tone than I felt. "Pia and I had an agreement which benefited both of us." Lucy retorted, "You are in love with Pia, and I can see it. I believe that Pia loves you as well, but she is unaware of it." I informed her that, should she choose to terminate the relationship, I would be compelled to intervene and prevent her from doing so. Lucy removed one hand from the steering wheel and placed it on my thigh, indicating a desire to touch me. I instructed her to return her hand to the wheel. Lucy complied, but then quickly removed her hand from my groin and returned it to the wheel. I interjected, "Ron, I apologize for the inadvertent contact. I have no experience with a male partner, so I am uncertain of the appropriate conduct. My mother has been a close observer of my interactions." I then proceeded to convey my intentions. "I merely wish to inform you of my circumstances. I have since relaxed my stance." I inquired, "How did Pia respond to your disclosure of your romantic interest in me?" I was uncertain of her reaction, given her previous demeanor. "Has Mr. Wonderful, the fisherman, returned home?" Lucy visibly relaxed. "Ron, my sister Pia reacted with great distress when I informed her that I was interested in her. She appeared to believe that I was about to take her virginity. We engaged in a heated argument, which even my mother joined in on. I was perplexed as to why Pia would be so distressed. Lucy, I am surprised that Pia is bothered. Pia has been pining for him for some time. For her fisher back home, like a starving man craves food." Lucy clenched her jaw. "Ron, I need to tell you something, but you have to promise not to tell. Pia cannot do it." "Lucy, Pia's still my wife, I do not keep secrets from her." Lucy tightened her jaw again. "Dang it, Ron. I can't spill the beans." Then we drove in silence for a while longer. Eventually, my curiosity ultimately led me to inquire further. I had promised not to divulge the information, so I inquired as to the circumstances surrounding it. Lucy pulled into a parking lot and expertly backed into a space, just as I had taught her. "Ron, Pia's boyfriend back home, is a fisherman. He has 2 children with 2 different women, and they are unaware of each other's existence. A sailor with a girl in every port." I found this amusing. However, I advised Lucy to inform her sister, as it was unfair to keep her in the dark. Lucy turned off the car. "Ron, the man in question, is not aware of this. Even his mother and wife are unaware of the situation. The man in question, Pia, wants to spend his life with Lucy. He is not concerned about spending long periods of time away from home. On a boat full of fishermen, he is quite popular with the other fishermen." I slammed my hands on the dashboard. "Lucy, are you saying that he is bisexual? This is a lot to take in." I paused, pondering. "You have to tell Pia. You can't keep this from her." "So, is this just hearsay, or do you have any evidence?" Lucy hesitated before responding. "Ron, I was interning at the hospital when he brought in a girl with a baby. The child looked just like him. He subsequently claimed paternity a month later, with a different girl and baby. I inquired about the circumstances and was informed that the girls live with their parents while he resides at one house or the other when he's not on the fishing boat." Lucy appeared to be disinclined to discuss the matter, stating that the man in question was not gay. She explained that it was simply a matter of guys being guys and making do in the absence of women on the fishing boat. She added that he did not appear to be bothered by it, as it was common knowledge. Lucy firmly met her gaze and stated, "You must inform Pia that Ron is not to be trusted." Pia would not believe her. Lucy continued. "She is stubborn and still sees him as her high school sweetheart, but that was ages ago." After a moment of silence, Lucy continued, "In fact, Ron, I have changed my mind. You can tell Pia if you wish." Lucy started the car and we headed home in silence. I was lost in thought. Should I inform Pia? Would she trust me? And if she did, what would it mean for us? Then it hit me. I came to the realization that I loved Pia, but that I needed her to love me fully in return. If I told her about Mr. Wonderful, she might stay, but only as a second choice. This seemed selfish, but I wanted to be her top pick. On the other hand, Lucy and I had been growing closer, and she admitted that she had feelings for me. Perhaps letting Pia go was the right move. Alternatively, I was just chasing an illusion. The drive home was quiet. I finally came up with a plan, offering what I saw as a win-win situation. In a favorable scenario, I would not divulge information about Mr. Wonderful to Pia until a suitable time had passed. If Pia truly loved me, I wanted to hear it from her. If she still wanted a divorce, I would let her go and pursue Lucy. I would then reveal information about Mr. Wonderful after the divorce. Pia could then make her choice. However, I would no longer be a factor in her life and she would be unable to return to me. As we arrived at the house, I experienced a peculiar sense of calm. The house had not been this cheerful since the death of my grandparents. Lucy spent a significant amount of time studying with me while my mother maintained the house and prepared meals with great skill. I was conscious of the need to maintain a healthy weight. My relationship with Pia was becoming increasingly close, yet I was uncertain as to her thoughts and feelings. Was she contemplating a future apart from me? I considered the possibility that she was considering her future back home and the implications this might have for our shared bedroom life. However, our relationship remained active, and this did not provide any clues as to her intentions. Dinner conversations with the three ladies were lively, and weekend parties with Pia, Lucy and Mom were twice as enjoyable. There was little I could do, so I awaited Lucy's completion of her examination and kept the divorce papers updated with my attorney. It all depended on Pia's next move on Lucy's examination day. While Mom was out shopping and I was working in the den, Pia came to get me and I observed that her eyes appeared to be teary, which led me to anticipate the worst. I postulated that Pia had waited for us to be alone to spare my feelings. Upon entering the bedroom, I observed that Pia was seated on the bed, appearing fatigued but still attractive. There was an envelope addressed to Mr. Wonderful, the fisherman, seated beside her. This was an unusual occurrence, as Pia typically maintained the confidentiality of her correspondence. It was widely known that she engaged in communication with him, yet I ceased inquiring about the letters when I began developing genuine feelings for her. Ron. Pia began inhaling deeply. She informed him that she had informed him of her decision, indicating the letter in question. She stated, "I don't want to be his wife anymore." I expressed my best wishes to him and proceeded to discard all of his old letters. I expressed my desire to be his wife and inquired as to the cause of the change in his sentiments. "Pia," I inquired, "what prompted this shift in your perspective?" "Pia, you changed." "I did not." "You made me love you." Pia embraced me tightly. "I had always known you were a good man. My mother had warned me not to let you go." Then, Lucy expressed her interest. I now perceived the perspective of others and I gently disengaged from Pia's embrace, recognizing that her mother or sister's desire is not a sufficient rationale for my continued involvement. "Pia, I am not a mere possession to be retained at your mother's discretion. I am not a mere object to be discarded at her convenience." Lucy assisted me in recognizing the truth of my situation. She helped me to understand the depth of your actions and the impact they have had on me. For our family, a true husband is one who acts out of love for his wife. Words and promises are not the foundation of a lasting marriage. I informed her that her gratitude was merely a sentiment for a pet, but that it was not a solid foundation for a lasting marriage. I told her that her gratitude was merely a sentiment for a pet, but that it was not a solid foundation for a lasting marriage. I informed her that her gratitude was merely a sentiment for a pet, but that it was not a solid foundation for a lasting marriage. I informed her that her gratitude was merely a sentiment for a pet, but that it was not a solid foundation for a lasting marriage. I informed her that her gratitude was merely a sentiment for a pet, but that it was not a solid foundation for a lasting marriage. I informed her that her gratitude was merely a sentiment for a pet, but that it was not a solid foundation for a lasting marriage. I informed her that Pia insisted, "Okay, Pia. I was curious as to whether Lucy had informed Pia about Mr. Wonderful back home and whether I was simply a consolation prize. Pia settled back on the bed. Ron, I realized that I had begun to love you last year. I was not concerned if the letters came, as I sometimes did not feel like writing back. This was because of you. I anticipated our time together and even found reasons to postpone the divorce. Despite our limited financial resources, we had each other's support. I was determined to ensure her happiness. Pia appeared genuinely sincere, and I was faced with a crucial decision. I embraced her and she led me to the bed. She began to engage in the behaviors that I had previously observed in Ron. I informed her that I would provide her with the fulfillment that she had been lacking for an extended period. Pia whispered in my ear a study from the University of Texas that had revealed that marriages built solely on romance often fail because partners have unrealistic expectations and limited room for growth in the relationship. This contributes to the high divorce rate in America. However, I believe that Pia and I had a better chance of success since we had no place to go but up. Next month marks our 21st wedding anniversary. She slowed down somewhat with our 4 children. I believe that she only gets about 5 hours of sleep a night now between childbirths. Pia met in order to become a registered nurse and pass the requisite examinations. She has spent years in the role of charge nurse at the local hospital, maintaining order among the younger and older doctors. The entire family celebrated when Pia became a U.S. citizen. Her smile is still a source of joy and my affection for her continues to grow. I have previously mentioned the A Trust Fund was established for Pia, but this did not significantly alter our standard of living as our family expanded. Pia purchased the house next door for her mother to reside in, and the children enjoy having their grandmother nearby, as do their parents. Lucy attracted considerable attention when she began working, but she did not socialize much. Her frequent visits to McDonald's led her to the couple met at work and eventually married the manager there. He was a regular, decent man. After they filed their taxes following their marriage, Lucy discovered that he was not just the manager of the McDonald's franchise, he owned several such franchises. They will celebrate their 17th wedding anniversary this summer with their 3 children. Sometimes, being a regular pays off.